Hello, this is Bear, and welcome to a video about defenses against magic in DDO. So this is a general overview of the different kinds of stats that exist to protect you from enemy spellcasters, as well as things like elemental traps and certain champion effects. The first thing we are going to do, as I turn my UI back on, is we are going to go here into the character sheet, and we're going to take a look at the saves section. So saves are right here between base attack bonus and armor class under the saving throws section. We right off the bat have a DDO lies to you, as the formatting of this section implies to you that this BAB is a saving throw. It fully isn't. It really should be separated from the other three, but it's not. Your three saving throws are Fortitude, Reflex, and Will. Fortitude is kind of your body's physical defenses against things like often poison and disease will be tested by Fortitude saves. However, at the same time, it will also be your saves against many instant death effects and certain other kind of body-destroying effects that are magical. Reflex saves is generally your character's ability to dodge, jump out of the way at the last second, turn their body and their shield or whatever else, such that they take reduced damage from things like explosions, fireballs, cones of cold, whatever other kind of magical effects that you could theoretically just kind of dodge. And then Will is mental defenses, so if there's a effect that wants you to, for example, be controlled by someone else, not really modeled exactly that way in DDO, but whether it's like, lie down on the ground and do nothing. Your will save will be your mind's ability to say, that's a bad idea. I'm not going to do that. Typically, when you are being hit with a status effect spell, those are usually going to be will saves and sometimes fortitude saves. If you pass the save, you fully negate the effects of the spell, especially if it's an only status spell. When we're talking about damaging spells, the vast majority of them, starting off, are going to actually be reflex saves, sometimes fortitude saves, are going to be save for half damage. Meaning if you are going to take 100 damage and you pass the save, you're going to take 50. There's a few notable exceptions like Nyax and Polar Ray that are kind of all or nothing, or in the case of Polar Ray, fully there is no save. Additionally, characters with the feat Evasion, this is not a feat that you can take, this is a feat that is either granted by class levels, or occasionally it will be granted by some epic destinies, or you can get like a trance from a past life that temporarily gives you this ability. But basically, if you have that feat, you meet all the requirements such as light or no armor and minimal encumbrance. You will, instead of taking half damage, take no damage. And then, of course, there's the approved evasion feat, which says even if you fail, you take half damage. For a saving throw benefit to be effective, your save needs to be within 19 of the effect's DC. Otherwise, it has literally no effect. Right? So let's say that you have like a +4 to your will save, and the DC that you're trying to hit is a 25. Getting another +1, going from +4 to +5, will not change how often you actually save. Because rolling a natural 20, so 5% of the time, you automatically save no matter what your plus was. Right? So you still, at +4 and +5, in both cases, you would pass a DC 25 save exactly 5% of the time. There is no change. However, if you were at a +5 and you went to a +6, suddenly you are now saving on a 19 as well as a 20. So now you've doubled your effective chance of saving. You've gone from 5% to 10%. Similarly, if we're too high over that kind of threshold for the DC, increasing it has no effect, right? So if you have a +18 against a DC 20, you save on a 2, right? And you can go, oh, well, but on a 1, I want to be able to hit that 20, right? Well, on a natural 1, unless you have a specific effect, almost all of which come from either epic destinies or epic feats, natural 1s always fail, just like natural 20s always succeed. So there is no mechanical benefit against that DC 20 check from going from plus 18 to plus 19, unless you have one of those no fail on nat ones. Typically speaking, this is not something you need to worry about too much, because obviously you can always just go, okay, but what about the higher level content? What about the more challenging content? What about a higher Reaper, right? Whatever else you want to do, what about that one specific monster that has a really high save DC? You can find a lot of niche applications for it. It's just something to keep in mind when talking about saves. Moving on to spell resistance. Spell resistance you can find right here above fortification. Spell resistance acts as kind of an armor class against most single target, non-damaging spells. There's a few area of effect ones like Mass Hold Monster and Otto's Dancing Sphere. I can't remember the name of it. But there's a bunch of those kind of effects, but typically even those are individually affecting people within it. And they also typically tend to be mind-affecting spells, although that is not 100% true. It's just like kind of the most common use case for it. In order for a spell like, for example, Hold Monster or Otto's Irresistible Dance or Flesh to Stone to actually even go to your saving throws, if, unlike Otto's Irresistible Dance, which has no saving throw, it first has to beat your spell resistance. Your spell resistance is, again, it's just this flat number. Your character isn't rolling anything. Instead, when a monster casts one of these spells on you, they roll a d20 plus typically their CR. There's a couple of times when that's not the case, but typically it's just plus their CR. And if they hit that number or exceed it, great, their spell is affecting you. We go to saves, we go on as normal. However, if it's lower than your spell resistance, great, spell fails, you're good, nothing ever. You never even see a save. You just see this big blue wave pop up, and the spell is fully negated. If you have a spell resistance stat that is at least 3 above the typical CR of a monster that you are fighting against, it is doing something. If it is less than that, it is not doing anything. Similarly, if it's way too high above, extra points aren't doing anything, but again, it's hard to get to that point except at some of the very low levels, and it's not something that we typically need to worry about with spell resistance. Next up, we're going to talk about damage absorption. Now, damage absorption is not actually found on this page. It's in this little plus tab over here, and it's in elemental defenses. We're going to scroll down. Now, you see all of these here that say absorption. So we have acid, chaos, cold, electric, blah, blah, blah. Oh, it nicely fits on one page here. Ooh, love that. Okay, so taking a look at these, you can see that these are percentage values. These are not absolute values. These are percentage values. Damage absorption is a percentage of damage from a particular element. So, for example, here my fire absorption is 66%. So it's a percentage of my fire damage that is being removed from incoming damage. It stacks multiplicatively. Now, for those of you who are not kind of math people, what that basically means is if you have a 50% absorb item and maybe a ability that gives you 50% absorb or a spell that gives you 50% absorb, basically you have 2 different stacking sources of 50% absorption. Rather than giving you 50 plus 50 is 100%, it will give you 0.5. You'll take 0.5 times 0.5 damage. 0.5 times 0.5 is 0.25, which will translate to 75% absorption. Basically, the more absorption you have, the smaller the change as an absolute number is. However, it is always 50% of the damage you're taking before you introduce the new thing, or whatever the percentage is, right? So when I have my 50% on, I'm taking half damage. And when I put another 50 on, I'm taking half of that half damage. This stat is a very, very powerful way to lower damage in the end game that you're receiving from magic damage. This is one of the kind of primary levers that you can pull to make yourself better at surviving against magic using enemies. Right, as you can see, like my cold absorption up here is 74% off. And this is only one of the things reducing it. So I'm taking drastically reduced cold damage. Now, this character is not a tank. This character is not building to have as much of this stuff as possible. I've seen some of the tanks that I play with get as high as 96% reduction. So do not take these numbers as being like, crazy, crazy high. They're not. They're actually quite reasonable and attainable, but they're a little higher than the average DPS at the same kind of power level that I'm playing at, just because I'm using a lot of things from the Grandmaster of Flowers tree that happen to, at rank 3, give you some absorption. Next, we're going to move on to damage resistance, elemental resistance, which is right up here above it. However, this is one place that you can find it. The other place you can find it, the main ones that you usually actually see, hang out down here. This is a flat number removed from the incoming damage of a given type, so it's very similar to absorption, but instead of a percentage, it's just that flat, just minus this number. This actually can reduce incoming damage to 0, so you can just be fully immune to an effect if your resistance is high enough. There is a problem with it, though, which actually winds up making it basically useless at the end game. It is like a dead stat at the end game. And the problem is, it gets taken off before all of your different percentage reductions. So before your absorption and before something we're going to talk about in a second, your MRR. Meaning, if you've got 1,000 damage incoming, but you're going to reduce it by 90%, right? So we're taking down by 90%. We're taking this 1,000, we're turning into 100. And you've got, let's say, my fire resistance here of 42. Yeah, it's not going to be 58. It takes it off at the absolute beginning of the calculation, right? So it would be that 1,000 minus 42 times 0.9. Sorry, times 0.1. That was math error, which means that 42 resistance has reduced the damage you're taking down by, depending on rounding, 4 or 5 points. That's not very good, right? As you can see, like outside of Reaper standing, I have over 3,000 health, and this is by no means a maxed out character. So you're really not actually reducing much in the end game. However, by the same metric, in the early game, if you're getting like one shot by casters and you want to throw on a like resist fire to just drop that scorching ray damage down, this will be extremely powerful for keeping you alive in low levels. So you can kind of see damage resistance as the low level way to survive and damage absorption as the high level way to survive. Next up, we're going to talk about what is arguably the most complicated part of this, which is your MRR rating. This one right here, bottom right of the screen. Magical resistance rating is a formula that takes that stat and uses it to generate a percentage reduction from all incoming magical damage. For those of you who are curious, the formula is 100 divided by the quantity 100 plus your MRR stat. For some examples, for those of you who don't want to sit and do that math, some of the critical numbers, 50 magic resistance rating. Sorry, 1 magic resistance rating is 1% reduction. 50 MRR is 1/3 reduction. 100 MRR is 1/2 reduction. 200 MRR is 2/3 reduction. And as you can kind of see from the examples, the more points you have, the less the absolute percentage increases per point. However, due to the way that this math kind of works, each individual point, similar to absorption, is kind of a similar percentage of your actual current damage taken being removed. So it is always useful to keep stacking it. It's just like mathematically less useful, and eventually it becomes better rather than increasing your MRR to go back and maybe, if you've got a more efficient way to get some hit points or something like that, like there might be a better way to do it just because of how much the individual point starts to fall off. But it is never bad, and it is never useless to get more MRR. MRR has a cap, however. As you can see, like my MRR is way lower than my PRR. That's because I'm wearing cloth, and I've got I have some things to increase that cap. There's plenty of ways that you can do it. The base cap for cloth is 50. And if you're wearing light armor, that cap is 100. Now you can see, obviously, I've gone well over that cap. I've gone more than double my cloth cap on a monk. I'm wearing cloth armor. But that's all due to, if I open up my inventory, I believe right here, as you can see, right here, we have this solar gem of MRR cap plus 30, right? There's a few other places I'm getting it from my, I believe, from my monk enhancements. I'm getting it from my Grandmaster of Flowers epic destiny points. I'm getting it from a lot of different sources, but ultimately it's just upping the cap and making it possible for me to have a slightly higher MRR. The next one we're going to talk about is spell absorption. Now, for spell absorption, I'm actually going to bring you down to my bar here, and I'm going to take a look at this jeweled cloak. Jeweled cloak is one of a very small number of items that actually has the spell absorption mechanic on it. It's an extremely powerful defensive tool, and it's always on something equipped, right? The three examples I think that are kind of the most famous are the Pale Lavender Ironstone, the Jeweled Cloak, and the Mantle of the World Shaper. All of these are things that fully negate incoming spells based on their charges. So you can see here I have 25 charges recharged per day, 10. That per day just means per time that the game considers you to have rested. So there's three ways that typically happens. One is you use a rest shrine. The second one is you recall from a completed quest. And the third one is you spend enough time in the tavern that you get that little refresh thing where it gives you all of your charges of your abilities back, and it starts like removing debuffs from you and things like that. It will also recharge these. Because this fully negates an effect, it is a very useful thing to throw on if you know you're about to fight some highly lethal casters. Some examples of this could be flame skulls, nothics, and water elementals. There's a lot more, but these are some like fairly common enemies that you'll see running around that are all like completely negated by just tossing some spell absorption on. Though you will run out of it quickly, so you're going to still want to focus those guys down, partially because they will burn through it and kill you eventually, partially just to preserve your charges so you can do it again next time. In terms of your like generic defenses, that's kind of the end, but I am going to talk about a few of the more niche magical defenses. The first one is a category. It's Death Ward, Fire Shield, and Energy Sheath. These are effects that all give you 50% absorption to something. Death Ward is 50% absorption to negative energy. Fire Shield is your choice of 50% absorption to fire if you use cold, or 50% absorption to cold if you use fire, so it's the opposite of the one that you pick. And Energy Sheath is 50% absorption to the one that you pick from the Epic Destiny. This is straight up just absorption, so if we go back over here, I'm actually going to pop this over here. This is a Scroll of Fire Shield. I'm going to demount, and I'm going to cast it. Let's say the cold version. So you can see earlier I had, I believe, 66% fire absorption. Now I have 83% fire absorption, right? So going back to that multiplicative, it cut my incoming fire damage in half, right? Fire shields, so the hot and cold fire shield, as well as energy sheath, do not stack with each other. So you can see here, I'm currently glowing blue because I had that cold one. I'm going to click here. I'm going to click the fire version, and you're going to watch my fire absorption go down and my cold absorption go up. So I'm going to turn on this fire one. As you can see, my fire absorption is back to normal. My cold absorption is now even higher. I've now got only the fire shield up. And if I went and did the energy sheath, you'd see the exact same thing happen, but for a different element. Similarly, if I go down here to negative absorption, you can see I'm at 0%. I'm going to hit my clicky here. By the way, this is a great clicky. It's from the final enemy quest in the Salt Marsh, the end chest. Lets you cast a 30-minute AoE Death Ward 3 times per day. I'm going to throw this on here, and you can see my negative absorption jumps up to 50%. This one, you'll note, did not cancel out my fire shield. So this one actually does stack with the other ones. Additionally, Death Ward also has some other effects. It blocks instant death effects, and it blocks negative levels. So if you're getting hit with a bunch of, like, you know, you're getting struck with like -8 levels from people casting like Enervation or whatever, you can throw this on, you'll be fully immune to that effect. That is kind of a overview of that section. You can scroll cast Fire Shield, and there is an Eternal Potion from an event for Death Ward if you're looking for another way of getting it, but that is not the Eternal Potion that I would recommend to a newer player. The next one is Shield and Night Shield. They are level 1 spells that come from various different casting classes. Most casting classes get at least one of the two. That provide extremely negligible general benefits. I'm actually going to hover over this clicky down here. It's another one I've got. This is a Night Shield clicky. You see it grants a +1 resistance bonus to saving throws, up to 3 at 9th level. Now, resistance is one of the primary buff types, so 3 is next to nothing, given that, you know, even an undergeared character can be running around with like +15 resistance bonus, and those will not stack. So why do we care about this spell? Because of that second part, protection from magic missiles. The magic missile family of spells, magic missile, chain missiles, force missiles, are some of the most deadly spells in DDO. They hit multiple times, they bring multiple champion procs. They do big force damage. You can take thousands of force damage from a single cast at the endgame. So what this does is it fully just says, no, you're not hitting me with that. There's no roll involved. It's not like a plus resistance. It's not some absorption. It fully negates the spell. My recommendation is that you just always carry a source of either shield or night shield. Typically, if you can pull it off from level 1 all the way to level 34, 36 coming this summer, right? You can fully shut down one of the most deadly spells in the game with this. So you can fully ignore the fact that the base spells are not very good just for magic missile protection. Note that you can get magic missile protection from some other sources. For example, like the Renegade Master Maker tree from Artificer can grant permanent copies, or the Shadow Dancer tree in Epic Destinies can grant permanent copies. If you have that, you don't need to carry around scrolls, wands, or a clicky. It'll just handle that for you. Next up is Protection from Evil. I've actually banked my Protection from Evil clicky. But Protection from Evil has, similar to Shield and Night Shield's level 1 spell with some just bad effects that are not going to really help you, because if you're either going to be viewing the stats it gives you as irrelevant, or you're going to have a better version of that by the time that you're actually caring about the other effect. However, just like Night Shield and Shield, it gives you full immunity to something. What does this give you full immunity to? Mind-affecting spells. Mind-affecting spells include some obscure ones, like domination effects that you usually only see coming from vampires and beholders, and also the very, very annoying command and greater command spells, which have extremely long durations where you just sit down and let people beat you up. If you're getting hit with that, throw Protection from Evil on and you will be fully immune. Next up, we have Freedom of Movement. I'm actually carrying an Eternal Potion right here. This is from an event. This is probably the one that I would recommend to some newer players, because it's one of the harder ones to get reliably. You can definitely do it, but it's harder than Death Ward, in my opinion. This grants immunity to movement impairing effects. Now, it says that. It's not all of them. This is not a case of DDO lies to you, because if you read there, it does say immunity to most magical effects. So they give themselves some wiggle room. I'll give them that this time. They didn't lie to us. They're just not giving us very good information. So what kind of effects does this give you immunity to? It gives you immunity to Hold Person, Hold Monster, Web, Sleet Storm, Slow, Paralysis, and a bunch more. So this is a very, very useful thing to have. It lets you just kind of run through spell wards, although it doesn't prevent that slow. It only prevents the paralysis effect, so it's only some slows. It lets you run through webs. It lets you just kind of ignore the casters that spam paralysis and hold spells. It lets you run straight through the sleet storm that your teammate threw down to make you fall over in a boss fight, right? You can, by the way, get this from some other places. You can obviously cast the spell yourself, but you can also get it from like spell singer bard songs, and many items actually also just give this to you as a permanent effect. In that case, you don't need to use this. The last thing that I'm going to talk about are some of the kind of niche, non-obvious effects. So, for example, down here I've got my haste potions. Haste is a nice spell, especially at low levels. At higher levels, it doesn't really do much because you're kind of already have all the things it gives you just standing. But the nice thing it does even at high levels is it dispels the slow spell. If someone's got the slow spell on you, drink a haste potion, slow spell's gone, right? Lesser restoration potions. If you drink one of these, it will remove spells like Ray of Enfeeblement and effects like Exhaustion and the Fatigued effect from a Barbarian Rage expiring. It also removes stat damage, which is what it kind of says that it does. But yeah, if you just pop one of these, you can actually remove a lot of really annoying effects on you that it doesn't explicitly tell you that it will remove. I actually don't have any on me right now. I actually need to go pick some up for Bear, but remove paralysis potions, remove troglodyte stench. So that annoying effect that troglodyte monsters give you where you are like really slowed and you are attacking super slow and it often lasts for a really long time. Remove paralysis can remove that effect. Finally, remove curse potions, which you can see I actually have a lot less of than the other ones. That's because I use this one all the time, like just constantly, especially for many endgame raids. Because this also works on, like it says, counters and dispels bestow curse, which is a generic spell. You see kobold shamans throwing that around. But it also works on special curses. So this includes things like the Plague Reaper minus healing curse, the Clay Golem curse that just fully removes healing, mummy curses, both the healing immunity and the curse portion of mummy rot, and raid curses. So from raids like Project Nemesis and A Vision of Destruction. This just removes all of those, and it doesn't tell you that it does that. With that said, that is going to be the end of my overview on defensive stats and abilities for magical attacks. I did not cover absolutely everything. There's some very niche things, for example, Globe of Invulnerability, that I didn't cover. That kind of stuff is more quest by quest that you can learn eventually and just kind of pick it up from other players. But in terms of things that will kind of carry across all of the different environments of the game, that's about it. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.